Upper Karazhan is one of the returning dungeons in Season 4, and is known for having some of the trickiest boss fights in the game. I'm Dratnos, and in this video we'll take a look at this dungeon and arm you with the knowledge you need to conquer it. You'll start off with some forlorn spirits and shrieking terrors. You can skip past these with Shroud of Concealment or Potions of the Hidden Spirit, or simply fight them. Just make sure to interrupt the spirit's Soul Leech cast, and the terror's terrifying wail. If you're playing on a keystone level of 10 or higher, the second Forlorn Spirit is actually a Shrouded Dreadlord in disguise. These enemies grant you a stacking buff of whichever stat you'd like. You can choose at the start of the dungeon between Haste, Versatility, Mastery, and Critical Strike. If you forget to choose, don't worry, it'll just default to Versatility. These Dreadlords hit your tank with Vampiric Claws, which heals the Dreadlord based on the damage it deals, so Mortal Strike effects as well as tank defensives can reduce the healing. They'll also aim Carrion Swarm cones at your party, which damage and apply a nasty healing reduction to anyone hit. And they create Nightmare Clouds, which will force anyone who touches them to sleep for several seconds. Especially early on in dungeons, it's a good idea to grab any shrouded enemies you see in order to stack up the stat buff for the rest of the dungeon. Up next are two damaged golems, which can be fought here on the edge of the stairs to minimize the dodging of unstable energy, since it creates a bit of a safe spot for your group to stand. Then you'll deal with an Abstract Nullifier, which nullifies players, silencing them until they collect the purple orbs that only they can see. You can line of sight the Mana Confluences and Mana Gorged Worms back to avoid pulling the Curator early. But if you do accidentally pull it, don't panic, as it'll reset if you pull it outside of the room. Once you're ready, the Curator is a pretty simple fight that will check your group's throughput. Kill the volatile energies as quickly as you can so you don't get overwhelmed, and dodge the Power Discharge Ground Lightning Zone. You can stack up before these discharges go out in order to keep them neatly grouped. Once you get the Curator down to 0 mana, it'll cast Evocation, taking 100% increased damage, a great time to Bloodlust and nuke the boss. The infused Pyromancer after the Curator is actually the shrouded mini-boss, Zul'gamux. This enemy spawns bats that will try to hypnotize someone in your party. This is pretty much a death sentence if it goes off, but luckily the bats can be CC'd and will then despawn. Zul'gamux also periodically gains a shield and casts Blood Siphon. Burst through the shield to kick this cast and stop the heal, and again use any Mortal Strike effects you have to lower the healing. Your reward for defeating this enemy is 3 stacks of your chosen stat buff. Next, you'll encounter a Wrathguard Flamebringer. A good choice is to skip this with something like Shroud of Concealment or Potion of the Hidden Spirit. If you do fight it, watch out for the burning tiles on the ground, and the cleaves that can hit unsuspecting players since the mob likes to slide around. The Shade of Medivh is likely this season's scariest boss for pugs, so watch out. He alternates between several interruptible spells. Piercing Missiles, which nukes the tank and stacks a damage taken increase. Frostbite, which damages and indefinitely stuns a target. And Inferno Bolt, which is a hit that leaves behind a dot, but also can be used to break players out of the Frostbite. You'll want to interrupt Piercing Missiles early in his channel to stop the tank from getting murdered. Frostbite is also an important interrupt, with Inferno Bolt being the least important interrupt, and something that should be actively not interrupted if a Frostbite has gone through. At 100 mana, Medivh will cast a very powerful ability from among 3 possibilities. Ceaseless Winter deals heavy damage if you aren't constantly moving. Flame Wreath picks 2 targets to put a fire ring around. If anybody touches the fire, everyone dies, so it's best nobody moves at all during this. The final potential cast is Guardian's Image, where Medivh splits into 3 images that deal ramping damage. Focus them down one at a time to avoid this becoming lethal. After Medivh, you'll fall down to the library, while being shrunk to a very small size. At this size, even the normally harmless rats and spiders are dangerous enemies. You can skip past most of them to get to the next boss, a single Mana Devourer. You'll need to make sure the Mana Devourer does not reach 100% mana by absorbing loose mana before it reaches the boss. This gives you a stack of unstable mana, which does sizable damage, but also gives you a damage buff. So you might be interested in holding on to a few stacks of this. To avoid it getting too lethal, drop off those stacks in the energy voids. Past the mana Devourer, you'll run into an infused pyromancer, who will summon fell bombs that need to be soaked by having someone stand in them, or else they'll explode for heavy party-wide damage. Pyromancers also summon gleeful immolators that shoot fire around themselves. You can kill them, or simply run away from them since they're rooted in place and will despawn when the pyromancer dies. You'll then encounter a chess event. Focus down a piece, the knights have the least health, while dodging the moves that they're doing and staying away from the king. Once you kill a piece, the king will be stunned and loses damage reduction for 20 seconds. At this point, you should do as much damage to the king as possible. Once the king dies, you can fight the last boss. Viz'aduum the Watcher awaits at the top of Karazhan. A general rule of thumb on this fight is that any green effect should be dodged, such as the Disintegrate cast that the boss will aim at players, and the Fell Beam and Bombardment abilities from the Legion ships. At 66% health, the boss retreats, and you'll need to follow it through the portal to get to its ship. You'll then run a gauntlet to get to the boss, while dodging the Disintegrates and ideally, avoiding the crackling green lightning zones, though ducking into these is better than being disintegrated. At 33%, the boss again retreats through a portal. When you follow, you'll have to pick up several adds and make it to the boss before it finishes stabilizing the rift, which you need to interrupt or else it will cause adds to spawn for the rest of the fight. Chaotic Shadows is a critical mechanic that, when it's dispelled or expires, sends out a nova of explosive shadows from the target. At the start of the fight, this is applied to only one player at a time, but each time Viz'aduum flees, he'll increase the number of targets. When multiple of these debuffs go out at once, it's a good idea to dispel someone far away from the group quickly, and then have the other player or players with the debuff run out to let their debuffs expire far from the group. Once Viz'aduum goes down, you've completed the dungeon and can collect your loot. We hope you've enjoyed this video. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the guides we've got coming up for Lower Karazhan and the Mechagon dungeons. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in Season 4.